What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. But before we get all into the topic for today, I would love it if you did a few things. Hit the like button, subscribe button, share button, and the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. And then when you are finished, leave me a comment below, and I'll get back to whatever it is that you had to say about this topic. For today's topic, I want to talk about why fleeing the United States is not a viable solution for foundational Black Americans, and why we ultimately need to stay in order to create empowerment and justice for the Black community in the future. So let's get into it. The reason why I wanted to talk about this topic is because I watched a video that I found very interesting the other day on YouTube. And it somewhat echoed some of the sentiments of things that I've heard from people who I've talked to in real life. And it was framed around this idea of being a Black person and then going to a different country. And I won't lie to you, I'm not exactly sure if this young lady was a foundational Black American or she was a non-foundational Black American, but either way, she was Black, and she was telling her story about how it was living in Japan and how she does not recommend that Black people live in Japan. And one of the main things that she talked about was how when it came to getting housing, there was a lot of discrimination, and she was too afraid to say that it was racism. So she said that it was discrimination because she was afraid that she was going to catch a lot of hell because racism is a buzzword. That alone tells me that she might have been a non-foundational Black American, but I'm not totally sure. Anyway, going back, so from my perspective, she was frustrated by this idea that she was being discriminated against no matter where she went when she was trying to find housing, and how they seemed to cozy up to individuals who were Japanese and they were able to find housing, but she had issues with doing that because she is Black. And the thing is she talked about how she even had a boyfriend or fiance, I guess at this point, who was Japanese as well too, and even with him being by her side, there still was a lot of discrimination. So she talked about that. She talked about how the job economy sucked and how they only wanted Americans who were able to speak English and to be able to teach English to a lot of the kids who were Japanese. And she also talked about how it wasn't really friendly and how she would try to speak to people, sometimes, and it kind of felt like it was almost somewhat of an anomaly for people to just kind of have friendly conversation, compliment each other, and all this other stuff, unlike America where you can go and you can talk to people. And ultimately, this was interesting because it echoed some of, like I said, the other things that I've heard before in the past. As a matter of fact, I have a friend, and she didn't experience the same thing, but it echoed kind of these sentiments of, what I would call the grass isn't greener effect, which I think that a lot of people who choose to flee try to do. So this friend of mine, and I'm not disparaging her for her choice because she wanted to be able to find out for herself what it was like. She lived outside of the United States for a little bit, and she worked in Japan, and she would tell me about how oppressive the work environment was there, and how her job essentially was teaching people English in Japan and all this other stuff. So her experience with being able to do different Japanese related things and whatnot was really cool because her and then my friend who she's actually married to, the two of them are really into Japanese culture, watching anime, playing Japanese video games, obviously, and all that other stuff. They're into that entire lore. So that was a big thing for the both of them. Now, he wasn't as gung-ho, from my understanding, about moving to Asia like she was and just being there and living there. But either way, she got to experience what it was like living in Japan, and it wasn't everything that it was cracked up to be. So that was kind of her experience as well, too. What this teaches you, once again, is that there is a grass is greener effect when it comes to foundational Black Americans, because I know for a fact that my friend I'm telling you about, she's a foundational Black American woman for sure. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I think that when we live in America as foundational Black Americans, and when we are not taught from a standpoint of trying to create empowerment, and we're taught from the standpoint of fear, and we see all of the racism and all the bad things that we experience, and when we grow up not having that reinforcement to basically say, hey, we need to stay and fight, the first thing that we think is, okay, so if we can't fight back, if there's nothing we can do, we need to just escape. And obviously the place that we're going is going to be much better than where we are right now. When people don't understand that white supremacy is a global concept, so you may get some form of it here in the United States, but you're going to get a different form of white supremacy and its chokehold even on other cultures in other nations. And so when you go to places like Japan, what you as a Black American are thinking is, oh, well, I'm not going to experience this idea of police brutality. I'm not going to experience this idea of white people doing, Karenisms and Kenisms and all this other shit to me. I don't have to worry about, housing discrimination and all these other things. Like, I can go there and this is a land where I can eat ramen all goddamn day, and I can sit here and I can, watch anime all the time, and I can go and get little cool Japanese figurines and all types of stuff, and nobody's gonna bother me. Everything is gonna be great, and I'm gonna live a whole new life. A lot of Negroes do this because they think that they're escaping to some type of promised land that's going to give them, from what I see, everything that they got in America that was good, minus the racism. That's what they believe that they're going to get. So that's why even when we go back to old girl's example from the YouTube video where she said, she was going there and, she found all these issues out when she got to Japan as far as her living situation, the job situation and all that. One of the things that she mentioned was that the other things were cool. Like, she liked the idea that she was able to get different Japanese foods and look at, kind of the Japanese lore and the little things that they had and relics and things like that. But ultimately, what she realized was that she wanted some parts of what she got in America. The ability to, maybe I can kind of go in my shell for a little bit, but every now and again, I may want to come out and speak to people and hang out with people and have a culture where people are friendly and all this other stuff. So she gets over there and she says, damn, this is a totally different world, and I'm still experiencing this racism that I didn't think I was going to get. And on top of that, too, she also was getting this idea that, when people, especially foundational Black Americans, I think they're the biggest people who are going to experience this. They go over to another country, they get stereotyped to a certain extent. So even if they talk to people in friendly conversation from a country like Japan, a lot of times they're going to insinuate that they are the stereotype that is fed to them. So for example, you are a foundational Black American, so obviously you must be good at sports. Obviously you must be good at creating music. You're good at, you can rap, you can sing, you can do all this other stuff that is performative because that is what has been fed to them. And they a lot of times idolize the dominant society and take upon their ways of being and their behavior. And you can even see the level of anti-Blackness that exists in Japanese culture a lot of times when you look at things like video games and things like that. And even anime, there's a lot of like anti-Blackness as well too. And I've talked about that in a previous video when I said how there was anti-Blackness in the game Super Smash Brothers. And mind you, I love Super Smash Brothers. I am a Super Smash Brothers head, but I cannot deny the anti-Blackness that I saw when I was playing the most recent game, the Super Smash Brothers Ultimate game, which is on the Switch. There's a lot of anti-Blackness there. There's a lot of anti-Blackness in anime. I mean, you can look at Dragon Ball Z. You can see little negative stereotypes and characters like Mr. Popo, because Mr. Popo has that blackface image. You can see characters like Jinx from Pokemon. You can also see, even in Pokemon, they had this thing where there was a gym leader in the Gen 5 Pokemon game. She was a normal type gym leader, and she was a Black woman, and she was wearing an apron and a scarf tied around her head. And the funny thing about that is that they said that her occupation was her being an archaeologist. So why would an archaeologist need an apron and a scarf? The only reason why is because they were trying to recreate a mammy image, but they were trying to be slick about it. So if you think about everything that I just told you, it shows you that there is a deep-rooted and even undercurrent sense of anti-Blackness that exists in Japanese culture, even in the things that they're trying to make enjoyable for others. So they ultimately are mimicking the dominant society by creating these negative images of Black people. But I want to be clear that this is not something that just goes for when foundational Black Americans or Black people in general who are in America are looking at trying to go to somewhere like Japan or somewhere else in Asia. This also goes for when people talk about this trek to the motherland and how if we go to Africa and we build over there and we create a pipeline, things are going to be better. But they also ignore the tribalism that goes on in Africa. They also ignore the sanctions that go on. The fact that, you know, their belief is, you know, if I'm coming from America and I'm going over to Africa, then I'm going to escape white supremacy because there's so many Africans over there. It's a land that is full of Black people, so they obviously rule it. But they're totally wrong, because there are a lot of countries in Africa that are having their resources stolen. The white supremacist still dominates, and they also are dominating a lot of the leaders that are over there, and the leaders are capitulating to white supremacist agendas. So they're ignoring all these different things. And again, going back, they're ignoring the tribalism that exists in a place like Africa. Now, mind you, me saying this is not a denigration of the brothers and sisters that are in Africa or that have come from Africa over to the United States and are now non-foundational Black Americans and have rode with us. This is to talk about the big picture of what is happening and what is taking place. A lot of times people believe that this is going to be the promised land that they can build on, but there have been tons of foundational Black Americans who actually have gone over to places like Africa, and they can't just go over there and build for free. They have to cut off a lot of money. And then on top of that too, even when they build, they get their places destroyed and stolen by some of the people who are over there, which I think is totally wrong, because if we're supposed to be one big Negro, then obviously we should be able to go over there and build somewhat of a pipeline so we all can work together and fight back against white supremacy. But it doesn't work like that. And anytime you speak about it, then it's a whole thing of you're being divisive, you're othering, and you're creating this stupid ass false equivalence, when the idea is that we're talking about something as it is, or we're literally straightening out something, versus us being haters or being disrespectful or us talking badly about our brothers and sisters. So people love to try to conflate those two like they're the same, and they're not. And I want to be clear too, me saying all this doesn't mean that I'm discouraging you from traveling and seeing different parts of the world. As a matter of fact, I would encourage you to see different parts of the world. I would encourage you to travel out there and understand different people's cultures. And I will also encourage you, when you do go to these different places, especially overseas, that you respect the soil that you go to and the people who rule that nation and the rules that they created. But what I don't suggest is that you stay there permanently as an alternative to fighting justice. So in other words, what I'm saying to you is there's a difference between visiting and full out fleeing. The bottom line is that we as foundational Black Americans need to stay here in America and build, for multiple reasons. Number one, because that is what our ancestors did. That is why we have an incredible nation, is because they unfortunately built it off of slave labor, but regardless, they actually were able to build something. So it shows you about the ingenuity, the strength, and the ability for us to create, even when we are being horribly subjugated and mistreated. It also is a thing that we should do, because this is a way for us to try to ensure reparations for foundational Black Americans in the country. We sit there and we fight for that. We stay in and we create rules and we create strategies around trying to achieve reparations. And part of that means staying in the country, because, you know, I've said this before, but when it comes to reparations, it's very simple how we're going to get it. We just have to get more people in line with the movement, which is we make it so that you identify a foundational Black American by whether or not your family has a lineage that goes back to the 1870 census and before. We also identify that this individual has claimed themselves as Black for 10 to 15 years. We're still deciding on what that number is, 10 to 15 years in America, which is why you need to stay your ass in America. And then on top of that too, we can also, show that these are individuals who we can kind of show like where their family comes from. So that's why we trace our lineage back. So it gives us the ability to basically say, hey, my family has been here for centuries and I'm still here as well too. I didn't leave. I didn't flee. I've stayed here to try to fight against white supremacy, because a lot of people leave thinking that it's hopeless and that there is nothing that we can do, when in actuality, all they had to really do was stay and fight and stand their ground and talk and speak up for foundational Black Americans, even if others were going to stand against them. Even if other foundational Black Americans stood against them, then they would still stand on their square. So that's the whole idea of why we should stay. And fleeing is not an option for us. Other cultures may do that. Other cultures may think that they can take advantage of the things that we have created and the idea of us advocating for them to come over here. But we don't do that. Even when they're not trying to advocate for us, that is not our flex. We are individuals who stand our ground just as our ancestors did. And we need to stop telling people to just flee out of fear because they're afraid that them or their family is going to be harmed in America, when the reality is that any bad thing can happen anywhere else in the world, because anti-Blackness is not something that just exists here in the United States, in the West. It exists globally. All right, y'all, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say, and I'll definitely have more to come, so stay tuned. Other than that, I will talk to y'all later. Peace.